Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and welcome to our webinar. I hope you can all hear us well. Cindy and I were connecting from Lima, and we have some issues with the connectivity, but I hope that we won't run into major issues during our presentation. Some of you might actually have been here a couple of weeks ago during the Regional Congress on Protected Areas in Lima, where the different countries of the Latin American region presented all their interesting and really relevant progress in terms of PA management, in terms of key species conservation, monitoring technology, and all relevant issues related to PA management. And it was also striking for us to see a great advance in getting PAs better recognized, also in their role in climate adaptation and climate mitigation, by forming part of the major strategies included in the NDCs of several countries of the region. So there were various reasons to celebrate. But it also, when we were here and we met with the different practitioners of those countries, we've seen that one issue essentially is still apparent and still very urgent in many of those countries in the region, and I guess all across the world, that the lack of funding or the lack of sufficient financial resources to actually manage the areas effectively and make them and enable them to confront the different threats that they're facing that are deriving from the different buffer zones, but also within those protected areas. When we look at recent numbers, here's the result of one study in strictly developing countries that shows that there's an overall need of about $2.5 billion per year to effectively manage protected areas in the region or in developing countries. But out of this $2.5 billion need, currently only about $800 million are spent annually on protected area management, leaving those protected areas in dire need for new financial resources to actually enable them to their full potential of providing ecosystem services, but also to enable them to adapt better to climate change and other issues and threats that are arising and becoming more severe over time. And it leaves them currently with about $1.7 billion gap per year. Now, $1.7 billion per year in the grand scheme of things is not such an unsurmountable challenge, or is not such a huge amount compared to other financial flows. But for the conservation area, it still remains a major challenge. And that challenge requires a solution at the same scale of its challenge. And PFP, or Project Finance for Permanence, tries to deliver one possible solution to this issue and trying to make a dent in this annual gap of protected area financing. And it also tries to address a couple of key challenges that conservation still faces in the day-to-day business. It tries to go beyond the project by project or piecemeal approach that we're so used to, trying to patch up the most emergent financial needs each year with new projects, but losing the view of the overall goal, the long-term goal of effective management and maintaining the biodiversity within our protected areas. PFP tries to take that long-term view of that long-term planning approach, and it tries to also not only look at the immediate needs of conservation activities on the ground, but also looks at enabling conditions that are necessary to be addressed to make sure that whatever impact we achieve on the ground can be maintained over long term. Those enabling conditions, they can include policy changes. They surely should include new sustainable financing mechanisms, and also the strengthening of all institutions that are somehow involved in the management of our protected areas and the landscape immediately adjacent to our protected areas. Having said that, our current definition of Project Finance for Permanence is the following. It's an approach that at one time secures important policy changes and all funding commitments necessary to meet specific conservation goals of a program over a defined long-term time frame, with the ultimate aim of achieving ecological, social, political, organizational, and financial sustainability of that program. So as I said, the main point here is we're trying to secure the funding right at the beginning and for all the program, for the entire program that we're facing, or the entire needs of protected area management that we have, going beyond piecemeal conservation projects, looking at not only the specific conservation goals, but also all the other conditions that are necessary to ensure that those goals that we achieve can be maintained. In a very schematic point of view, PFP uses a full costing approach and looking at all the costs that will be necessary to cover for effective protected area management, but also the activities that help improve institutional capacities, communication, implementation of sustainable financing mechanisms, and cost all of these activities over a determined time frame, 10 to 25 years is what we've seen, compares it to the baseline of existing sustaining country funds, and then looks at the remaining gap and uses the following approach to cover that gap. PFP is aware that there is immediate need to implement those conservation activities, that there is not enough time to wait. We have to implement them right away, and we have to ensure that the threats are under control. But it also recognizes that the country governments or other important stakeholders have not yet the opportunity or the capacity to finance all these activities that are needed. And this is where PFP uses a type of bridge financing approach, bringing in donors from different donors all around the world, multilateral, bilateral, and private donations that chip in, especially at the beginning, and cover those activities, especially over the first couple of years, while those in-country governments and in-country institutions increase their capacity to essentially take over the financing of these conservation activities, and after a determined time frame, be able to maintain whatever conservation activity or conservation impact has been achieved.
Caroline, excuse me.
Caroline,
this is Ray.
Yes?
There seems to be an issue with your slides. We can't see them advance.
Yeah, it's not on. It's not on projector.
It says I share my screen. That's weird.
You were sharing the screen, but it wasn't on slide. Wasn't on presentation mode, so it wasn't going forward.
Correct.
Let me see. This is the first time I'm using GoToMeeting, so maybe CFA, you could tell me what I need to do to make it. Let me see. So you can see my slides, but you can't see the slides moving forward. Is that correct?
Right. We can. If you put it on slide, click on the icon for slideshow, because then they'll advance.
Can you see it now? Can you see it moving?
We see one slide called missing link funding,
but it's not moving forward.
Right, it's not.
Because I have it on slideshow mode and it's moving on my screen, but that's weird. Let's just try it. I'm sorry, everybody. Thanks for making us aware of that. Let me see. Let's just try it like this. Can you see it now moving?
Yes.
Okay, let's just do it like this then, because I'm sorry, I don't know what the issue is. I'm sorry you missed that. So this is the definition that I've been talking about, a one-time approach to meet specific conservation goals and all relevant conditions that come with sustainability. And this is essentially the slide I was showing last, where the overall cost of the conservation program is financed gradually by diminishing contributions from donors and by increasing in-country contributions, so that countries are at the end of the program able or in the capacity to maintain whatever conservation impact has been achieved during the implementation of the program. This is where I was at. I'm sorry, everybody. Now I'll just continue. To get to the point where we can actually start implementing those conservation programs, there's
not on the slide
step one. Sorry?
It's on your library. It's showing your library, not the slide.
Oh, this is random, but Matt Pearl, I think you've taken over control.
Matt is taking over the world. Oh no, yeah, Matt's now presenting.
Yeah, let me see.
You may need to share your screen again, Carolyn.
Can you see it now?
It says you're the presenter, but we can't see the PowerPoint just yet.
Okay, let me try again, because on my screen it says I do. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. I hope I'll stay the presenter, but please feel free to interrupt again if you see suddenly other things. So the stepwise approach for PFP design or PFP development has the following steps. Now, not all of them are strictly sequential, but it's easier to demonstrate it like that. PFP usually starts with all different stakeholders, governments, donors, NGO partners coming together and defining their one charismatic or several charismatic and measurable goals of conservation that they want to achieve within a determined geographic scope, which could be the system of protected areas, but it could also be a major landscape that has very important ecological or ecosystem services that it provides to the country or international community at large. So once those charismatic and measurable goals have been defined, the next step is to translate them to a very rigorous and detailed conservation plan that shows all activities necessary, again, for conservation, but also for other enabling conditions for sustainability, and translates those activities in the next step to a cost and financial model. We'll look at that in the example of Peru. That shows how the costs are covered with different donor contributions, but also with in-country sustainable financing mechanisms. And also donors and other stakeholders come together to define how the program is going to be implemented, meaning who's taking responsibility for implementation, reporting, and monitoring and other activities, and all that is translated into a detailed operating manual. And in the meantime, in parallel, of course, there is the fundraising progress to raise all the required donor funds to be able to cover the entire, to be able, together with the in-government contributions, cover the needs, the financial needs for the conservation program. And once all the relevant or the important funds are, the needed funds are committed, and we've got all the planning tools in place, there might be still other closing conditions, other conditions that that are needed to ensure the success of implementation. That could be relevant policy changes or the installation of an IT system and actually permits to monitor all funds and monitor all results. All these closing conditions are agreed upon over the design process, and once they are met, is the moment that we call the single closing moment, where all the donors and the government and partners come together to sign an agreement. Say, okay, we agree that we want to achieve those conservation goals. The funding is available, or the funding commitments are all in place, and all other conditions so far have been accomplished that we need to have confidence that the conservation program is actually going to be successfully implemented. And only once this single closing agreement is signed, the implementation of the PFP initiative starts, and it follows the conservation plan, and it follows the intermediate results that are established in the conservation plan, and disbursements are measured against those results that have been achieved. So in that sense, it's similar to results-based payments during implementation, where disbursements are closely linked to the results obtained on the ground. And to close up this introductory part or description of PFPs, so far we've seen 6 successful cases of PFPs, 5 of them already in implementation, and 1 of them still in the design process, and hopefully closing within the coming 12 months in Colombia. And as you can see, and we'll share this presentation afterwards gladly, all of the PFPs have significant number of hectares that they're covering, so it's a significant conservation goal that they have, and have different amounts or transition funds, how we call them, the donor funds, raised towards to maintain those hectare goals of protected area systems in all cases. And given time, I'll skip the next slide and hand it over to Cindy to start introducing you to Patrimonio Peru, the example that we wanted to look at today, and show how all this theory or introduction you've seen right now has been put into implementation in Peru.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Cindy. Excuse my English mistakes. It's not my native language. Thank God I got Caroline here near me. Well, I work for protected areas and the Protected Area Service, or NAM. I'm a biologist, yet working with sustainable finance of PA since 2016 with Peru's Natural Legacy Initiative. We are going to talk about a big deal for conservation as an issue and also an agreement, meaning I'm going to tell you about the differentials of PDP initiative, the lessons learned, and the common challenges that we face with other countries, mainly Latin American countries. Let me tell you that Peru's Natural Legacy, or Patrimonio Natural del Perú in Spanish, PDP, was inspired by the PFP model. The main approach of this initiative is to achieve the effective management of protected areas of Peru, and it looks to generate a combination of private and public commitments in order to implement economic mechanisms to cover the financial gap to permanently and effectively conserve our protected areas. Even though Patrimonio Natural del Perú was inspired by the PFP model, it has been adapted in Peru to adhere with the context and challenges faced with regards to its governance structure, its financial administration, and through Peru's methodology to identify the necessities of its protected areas management to calculate the financial gaps. So let's start. First of all, I want to talk about a little bit about the context of Peru, about our protected area system. And as you know, Peru is a South American country. It's located right below the Ecuador. It has more than 1.2 million kilometers of square. Of that, 70% of this territory is preserved in protected areas. And we have more than 200 protected areas in the whole country of national, regional, and private administration levels. 76 of them are protected areas of national level, and within them are the biggest and the most representative part of our biodiversity. These national level PAs are managed directly by the Protected Areas National Service, or NAM, which is the governing body for all protected areas in Peru. Even though we are attached to the Ministry of the Environment, CERNAM has also administrative and budgetary autonomy, which is very important to develop PFPs. As a team in Peru, we have almost 1,000 employees. 82% of the employees are in the field, and 700 of them are park rangers. We are trying to be more inclusive, and we have protected areas manager. 9 of almost 49 are women, and 4 of them are coming from indigenous communities. About vehicles and infrastructure, we have for the whole country almost 600 vehicles and more than 200 infrastructures. We have been growing since 2009, which is the date of birth of CERNAM, but we are short and we have a lot of that. Our budget, just for you know, is about $25 million for the whole system. And because the link between human well-being and nature is not fully understood, mainly by decision makers like the Ministry of Economy, our budget is short for our duty, and compared with the budget of Lima's Recreational Park Service, is very short. Protected areas are, as you see, concentrated in the territory, and we are not only a natural asset, but also social assets. There is a popular saying here in Peru, and it says, where there is no priest or teacher, there is a park ranger. So let me show you a little bit more about what we are looking for. For PFP model, as Caroline said, you have to set clear goals. So the first activity that we established back in 2014 was to try to understand what effective management looked for protected areas in Peru. And we tried to put clear what impacts we are looking for, and we finally come to this. We are trying to conserve biodiversity, that this biodiversity gives us ecosystem services. It means that it's functional, and those ecosystem services gives benefits for the people in protected areas and the buffer zones. For us, this is the only way to put clear for people the benefits from protected areas so they can help us to conserve the biodiversity. As you can see here, this is a part of the entire effective management scheme that we designed. For the protected management, for protected areas management, we have a territorial level, a system level, and a protected area level. Here you can see just only the protected area level. And the protected area effective management requires a lot of processes, strategies, and supplies. And as you can see here in the green rectangle, we prioritize processes for effective management and governance. We are prioritizing supplies for this adequate management. And we think that this part can catalyze effects and can set us the impact that we are looking for. Also, these enable conditions for effective management are covered by the Protected Area Initiative, PDP. Next, please. These are the enable conditions to effective management. As you can see, we have a level approach. We have 4 levels: preliminary level, basic level, structural level, and optimal level. The first 3 are same for all the 76 protected areas. The first one wants to cover the gap of representation of the ecosystems in the system. The second one and the third one are trying to give the protected areas minimum conditions to operate. For example, we have that all protected areas needs a PA management team, management plans, and a space to set coordinations, and have to set their boundaries and be registered in order to have security. And the third level is to have a surveillance and control system and a monitoring system. The fourth level is differential, and it sets in the opportunities of each protected areas. For example, you have tourism and natural resource management. And those are the conditions that are prioritized by PDP. And all of these goals are aligned to our strategic planning and our budget program for PAs. Our budget program is a public management tool that works with results. So these results of public management are aligned with PDP also. Next, please. As you can see here, with this context and enabling info, we designed PDP. The main objective of Peru's natural legacy is to consolidate the effective and sustainable management of this system in 20 years. The goal is that 19 million hectares are protected in public and private partnership for a sustainable future. And we decided to make it happen with a phase approach because it wasn't really possible to fundraise all the initial capital that we need for the whole system. We have almost like $400 million in gap for the 20 years for the whole system, and it was impossible to capture $200 million in 3 or 4 years. So we established 2 phases. Phase 1 is in Amazon, and phase 2 is going to be in Andean part and coastal part of Peru, including the ocean. Why phase 1 in the Amazon? Because we have here the most important commitments of the country in matters of climate change. All of our NDCs are in the tropical forest region in the Amazon. Also, it's very charismatic. A lot of donors mainly want to set their contribution to the Amazon. And also because the Amazon part of Peru has 38 protected areas, almost 17 million hectares, and more than 86% of the system surface. So it's really important to start in the Amazon, and we are very proud to have beginning this in 2019. Next. Here we have the partners of Patrimonio del Perú. Peru government through CERNAM and the Ministry of the Environment are the leaders, but we have external agents as partners, financial, technical, and administrative partners. The role of external agents are key for the PDP, and not only because of their valuable contribution in covering the financial gap in protected areas, but also because they provide extensive knowledge and technical support to help Peru meet its conservation and financial goals. One of them is WWF. Due to the more flexible and mobile nature of this external capital, private sector and non-government actors can provide initial capital necessary to close financial management gaps and buy the state time to identify, develop, and implement new and improved revenue generating strategies that allow Peru to cover their gaps and to fill and to meet the goals that we set. Here we have the main innovation for PFP models in the world. The main innovation is that we have adapted the governance model of a PFP scheme. First, you have here two kinds of governance. In the bottom left, you have the public-private governance, and in the top right, you have the public governance. A PFP model traditionally works with a public-private governance through a transition fund that that an external agent administrates outside of the government. I mean, it says with a closing agreement that we set in a memorandum of entendimiento, MOU, and has a steering committee, an operation manual, and bilateral agreements between the donor and the administrative agent. That's the traditional way. But in Peru, we have a public governance that is in the right top part, where the government sets the agreements with the different partners and works through their public budget. Like I said, our public budget works by results, and those results are aligned with the goals of PDP, so we can converge those two worlds in the implementation strategies where are set the impacts and goals of the program and are the core of the MOU of the Amazonian PDP. I can tell you that, for example, Colombia is looking to develop something similar, inspired in the model of Peru. Next, please. And as you remember, Caroline talked about the PFP steps, and number one step was the charismatic measurable goals. So I'm going to tell you about this. These are the goals for phase one. As I said, consolidate effective management in 38 protected areas in the Amazon biome is the main goal. But we have impact milestones through the next 10 years. First of all, 16.7 million hectares reach satisfactory level on MET evaluation. MET is an evaluation effective management for protected areas that, for example, Jeff uses. The other impact is that more than 1.2 million tons of CO2 equivalent emissions are avoided, those in line with the NDC's commitment of the country. Other is that 3 protected areas established for perpetuity, closing gaps in representative biodiverse representation. It's almost like 500,000 hectares that are committed. Other is that 37 protected areas have effective surveillance and monitoring system. The other is to close entirely the gap with sustainable finance sources and to increase in more than 100% the income compared with the baseline with sustainable finance mechanisms. No? That is the core part of the PFP models. Next, please. PDP, sorry that you can see the photos. There's a series of photos there where we can show that we are very proud that now phase one is in implementation. The MOU single agreement has been signed in May 2019, making PDP my timer, making PDP the most ambitious initiative implemented by the government of Peru to preserve our natural heritage. It covers all the forests in Peru, Amazonian, coastal, Andean forests. We are very proud of this, and after this, I'm going to talk about the lessons learned, and now I'm leaving the word to Caroline.
Thanks, Cindy. Just very short in terms of the sustainable financing strategy that we applied for Patrimonio Peru. Once we had all these, if you remember, the management levels established.
Hello, Caroline, are you still on?
Hello?
Caroline, we lost you for a bit there.
Hello?
Are you there?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Can you start that slide again?
Yeah. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. As I said, connection was lost. Let me just switch to the presentation again. Sorry for that. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so we translated the needs to a very detailed cost model that then enabled us to map essentially the donor funds and the in-country financial mechanisms to those needs, taking into consideration all the restrictions that some donors had in terms of the years that they should, when the resources should be spent, or if they had any restrictions in terms of we can't spend on staffing or other things. So all of that was modeled in our financial model. And then for the counterpart of the government, Suriname is opting for 3 different types of financial sustainability approaches. One of them is, of course, increasing financial resources from new mechanisms. And the second one is transferring part of those management costs to partners or beneficiaries in the surrounding areas of the protected areas. It could be through administration contracts or through conservation agreements. And the third one is also looking at how we're currently spending those funds in our different strategies in control and vigilance and others, and see if we can improve and make those resource uses more efficient than they are currently to reduce our long-term recurrent costs. In terms of financial strategy, just very briefly, Suriname has opted for a 2-step approach. One of them, the first step for the short term, is working with financial mechanisms that are already in existence that Suriname sees an opportunity to improve their application. Also, existing mechanisms that Suriname currently doesn't have access to, but has the arguments to make to receive part of those mechanisms. So for this set of initial mechanisms, we see a potential in, of course, adjusting PA entry system to make it more coherent with the current willingness to pay and cost travel method that we've seen in a recent study, to improve the capacity of Suriname in terms of environmental compensation payments because infrastructure payments in the Amazon, infrastructure projects in the Amazon currently are legally obliged to make compensation or to pay for compensation for impacts they cannot mitigate, but they have not a lot of options where to put those funds. And Suriname, we're working with Suriname on establishing a transparent scheme of how part of those payments can be used to ensure or recover protected areas in the Amazon. We're also working on generating political support for PA participation in tourism airport taxes, because most of the tourists visit protected areas, but those taxes that are meant for infrastructure investments are not currently used for, say, visitor centers or other types of infrastructure that is needed in the protected areas. So we're trying to make a case to receive part of those funds for infrastructure in the protected areas. And one thing that really I think is a big leap forward is that Suriname is planning on establishing their own sustainable financing unit in Suriname that will work full time on developing new mechanisms and improving mechanisms that are in existence and building capacity and financial literacy across the institutions so that there could be more force behind the work on sustainable financing and working with new partners across the landscapes. And over the medium term, we're looking at new mechanisms that are currently not in existence in the country. One of them could be a carbon payment mechanism, tax or credit system, or others that MINAM, the Ministry of Environment, is currently also investigating. And in general, look at new partnerships that would reduce also pressures within the buffer zones of the protected areas that overall, again, would reduce cost of management and increasing also looking at increasing efficiency of institutional processes that currently incur a lot of transaction costs that could be improved. And I hand it back to Cindy for the last part on the lessons learned throughout the last years that we've been developing Patrimonio Peru together.
Well, thank you. This is the last part, and then we can have some questions from you. Where I have just 2 slides and 5 minutes. I'm going to talk about the challenges and lessons learned. First of all, there are many positive lessons learned that PDP initiative can share with you and with the world. First of all, we want to say that articulated strategic planning with financial planning to ensure coherence and integration in annual planning process is a key. Here you have in this slide at the left part the scheme of a PA management plan. The middle part you have the government budget program, and at the right part you have the PDP initiative goals. So as you can see, every part of this planning process is aligned. You have to make a unique planification system that in order to have a better understanding of have a plan implementation and to better report the results during the phase of implementation of this initiative. Another thing you have to have in mind is that institutional leadership and political championship is needed. Here in Peru, the government is the leader, and you have to set then with the different partners. You have to clarify the roles. You have to define the roles and work by that work plan. We are talking about the design part of this PFP scheme. And then you have to include time for capacity building and alignment of the departments in the institution, in this case, Suriname. You have to articulate interventions of different sources and requirements, not only the donors, multilateral projects, public sectors, but other in-kind contributions also, because you have to fill a very accurate gap. And then you have to remember that financial sustainability is not the ultimate purpose. In our case, is the effective management of protected areas, is to develop those impacts that we are talking to. And try to remember that you have to develop ad hoc governance model inspired by others, but truly owned and functional to your context. Put adaptive logs in strategy and governance documents, scale up the vision and take advantage also in the regional level. For example, for us, Amazonia is an opportunity, and we're working together with Brazil and Colombia to raise more funds together, and taking account that every help counts, not just financial, political will, technical assistance, and already existing finance in the territory count to add to the same goal. That's it for now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. And please excuse again the technical issues on our presentation. I hope it was still, you can still see most of the slides.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm not sure if we were supposed to see other slides. We stayed on slide 21, the model and cost. But hi, this is Ray Victorine, and sorry, I came late due to another meeting. But we do have some time for questions, and people could either indicate, ask questions. I think there's a way to raise a hand. Or we could just write into the chat box and I will pass on the questions. But would anyone like to take a question or ask a question? I'm trying to open my little box so I can see the whole list here a second, and it's not letting me do that. So I guess we're all having some technical problems today. But if someone has a question, could they just go ahead and put it to Caroline or Cindy? Yeah, there's a question about showing the lessons learned slide again. Would that be possible?
Yes. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can.
So this was the first one of bringing together the different PA management goals with the government and budget line items with our PDP initiative. That those should be aligned and there should be a clear link for the initiative lead to be able to implement the initiative efficiently and having a clear knowledge of where financial flows are going to. And this was one that we shared. Can you see this slide 26 right now?
Yes.
Okay, these were the lessons learned that Cindy was sharing last. Was there a particular question to? Can't see the chat right now because I'm showing the screen.
Okay, I have a couple more questions. The first one comes from James. He asked, is the source for what is the source for the PA spending and shortfall numbers that you used at the beginning of the presentation? 800 million current spending and 1.7 billion shortfall. He was wondering about the source of that data.
Yeah, we are happy to share that source that was studied by different practitioners of different universities. I don't have the full title right here right now, but we're happy to share that source together with this presentation.
That's great, because we will share the presentation, and if you could provide those citations, that'd be great. That'd be really helpful. Then Gina has a question, which she asked, this took 5 years, correct? Has that been similar for other PFPs? Do you know?
So what we've seen so far, most of the PFPs took about 4 to 5 years of development, and most of this was linked to getting agreement on activities and scope, but also on the fundraising part that took between 3 and 4 years in most cases, and we're using all the lessons learned that we've taken from Peru and Bhutan in that case to try and speed up this design process for the future of PFPs, knowing, having learned what we've learned over, for example, what Cindy mentioned, being clear on the roles, being clear on the different needs of the different partners, identifying capacities right at the beginning. So there's been a bunch of lessons learned that will help us speed up the process in the future. But so far, yes, the ones that I've been working on have taken between 4 and 5 years.
Great, thanks. Another question from Byron, which is, hold on one second. What about the inclusion of sub-national areas, such as the regional PAs that are part of the SINANPE, into the funding systems? Would they be included?
Well, we are not including the regional areas now, but we are trying to think about how. Maybe through the economic mechanisms, we can include some of them and give benefits from them. Or maybe we try to convince the Ministry of the Environment to make a PFP model for the regional areas also. We're thinking about it, but it's not yet decided.
In the case of Colombia, we definitely include some of the regional protected areas based on a set of criteria in terms of what
You speak louder, sorry, we can't hear you very well.
Sorry, can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
In the case of Colombia, we've included regional protected areas based on a subset of criteria. If they, what their relevance is in terms of connectivity, and also what is done in measuring and being
Sorry, it's breaking up.
Yeah, that's what I feared for the Wi-Fi here. That sometimes gets a bit bad, but I hope you heard most of what I said. Hello?
Hello? Yep. It was hard to hear your answer. I'm not sure if others were having a problem, but it was hard to hear the answer. It was kind of breaking up and you were soft.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
So in the case of Colombia, we definitely include regional areas that are important for ensuring connectivity between important ecosystems that are part of the initiative of Heritage Colombia. So it's definitely a possibility. In the case of Peru, the priority for phase 1 was on the national protected areas.
Okay, thank you. Another question comes about the spend over 20 years of the program versus a permanent endowment. So do you have a plan right now regarding what happens after that program period ends?
So phase 1 has a time period of 10 years. And the plan, so the comparison with an endowment, as people surely are aware, endowment funds require a much larger amount of fundraising or amount of donor funds being raised at the beginning, because you only can use the revenues generated by investments of those endowments. So in almost all the cases, and in the case of Peru as well, we're opted for a transition fund or sticking fund. And the idea is that after it's spent down over those 10 years, that this gives the government enough time to increase their funding to cover the maintenance or the recurrent costs thereafter to maintain whatever's been implemented during those first 10 years. And the projections of the mechanisms that we're looking right now at least give us confidence for the next 5 years to be able to manage that increase. And we're working on additional mechanisms to thereafter increase those revenues generated in country, because the idea of PFP is that after those 10 years, there would not be need for more donor funds for the activities that have been included in the PDP phase 1. Doesn't mean that there will not be donor needs for other activities, but for the ones that have been included, the idea is that those will be recurrently funded through in-country sustainable mechanisms.
And that there is a certain commitment then that government would be putting money in, but there's obviously no guarantee. Correct?
There is a commitment as far as government can commit to increase funding. Of course, they have no. There's a law that doesn't allow them to do earmarking of future resources. I think that's the case in every country. So we have a high-level commitment. It's a national priority. We have a presidential decree that makes Patrimonio Peru a national priority to work on increasing resources. But as I said, what Suriname is definitely more banking on is to create diversified new financial mechanisms and to work with other partners, while at the same time, of course, working on discussing with the Ministry of Economics to keep increasing the ordinary resources to the PA management system, as has been happening over the last years. The ministry has increased resources towards the PA system, just not fast
Okay, thanks. Caroline, by the way, there was a suggestion on the chat, and I think it's probably a good one that, we're having some difficulty in hearing you. It must be the internet connection in Peru that you have. And so someone has suggested that we could maybe on the website, you could send us, and we could post some of the answers to the questions that have arisen. Maybe just write up a response so that people could have them. I think people are really interested in. But as I say, it's a little bit hard. But there are a couple more quick questions, and then we'll close out. But they've been here for a while. Again, there was a question from Yurgos on the cost benefit of interventions around PAs. To what extent the interventions in the buffer zones surrounding the landscapes decrease the PA management cost compared to the cost without doing that? What type of interventions outside PA are to be carried out in Peru?
Well, that's an important strategy for us in Peru to work outside the protected area delimitation in buffer zones, because it reduces a lot the cost. We don't have an accurate number for that, but for example, in Pacaya San Miguel, that is a national reserve with more than 2 million hectares, the collaboration of communities that live inside the protected areas and in the buffer zones reduce almost like $400,000 the cost of dollars, the cost of the management of the protected area. We're working not only with surveillance or with community surveillance, but also with natural resource management activities inside and outside the protected area, trying to make sense of a sustainable way of managing the services and the resources. We have several examples of this, and we can share it with you if you like in more detail.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful. I think I think it's an important issue, as you say, and any data on some of the work you've done to determine some of those cost savings, I think would be really, really beneficial. And one other quick thing is that last question, I think for now, because we're getting to the time, is how is the initiative that's you presented on today on the PFP, how is that linked with the action plan, the Biodiversity National Strategy by 2021?
We lost you.
Oh, sorry. How is the initiative with the action plan linked to the action plan of the Biodiversity National Strategy by 2021 under MINAM?
Well, that's a really good question. Thank you. First, all PDP initiative is linked with all other documents of political level. For example, the commitment of Aichi targets, the Millennium Ecosystem Objectives, NDCs, and with the action plan of MINAM, of the Ministry of the Environment, we have some goals committed to set like 10 protected areas that are going to cover their basic and structural level by 2021, for example. And that's an example, but we can also talk with the person that asked this question, if you can share our emails.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that. We can definitely share email and make sure people have your contacts. And with that, I want to thank you very much for a very useful and informative presentation. I think people enjoyed it very much, and there were some really good questions. And good luck with the initiative, and we look forward to hearing more in the future about how things are moving forward.
Thank you, Ray. Sorry, everybody, for the connectivity problems, and we'll share the presentation with you as well as some summaries to the questions, and you can then share with the list of participants.
Yeah, we can always try to, hopefully these presentations will improve, we'll get our connectivity better and as we move forward, but it was great to have you from Lima and be able to at least get a decent idea of what you're doing, and we'll have a chance to put this information on the website and also get some of these questions answered with more detail. So thank you very much, and thanks everyone for attending, and look forward to joining us in another CFA webinar.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Ray.
bye. Thank you.